What you have just seen is a record of the incredible operations carried out by the Royal Marines, that is, the British Army's amphibious force, in Afghanistan. In that country, the Royal Marines were deployed with a mission as dangerous as it was important, to hunt down the Taliban and expel them from the communities they had taken as their own. In this military force video, we want to take you to the heart of those battles, to experience firsthand their experiences facing directly against almost 100 fierce insurgents who sought to annihilate the international force. The result was an incredible battle that reflects the multiple complexities presented by the war against terrorism during the 21st century. Put on your bulletproof vest and let's go patrolling under the scorching sun of the Middle East.
Tell him to tell his friends, the Taliban, all right? They keep taking my men on and we will kill them, all right? And if you pick up arms, we will kill you as well.
First, it is important to know what force we are dealing with. The Royal Marines are one of the most powerful rapid response teams on the planet. It is a unit with a long history, having participated in numerous armed conflicts, providing support to allied forces such as the United States Marine Corps or the Corps Mariniers of the Netherlands. During the 21st century, this assistance was reflected in constant offensive activities in Afghanistan as part of Washington's attempts to pacify the territory in order to eradicate the presence of Taliban terrorist cells. From the start of the invasion carried out by a coalition of NATO member powers, it was clear that Afghanistan was going to be a very difficult territory to dominate, both because of its geography, which combines mountains, valleys, forests, and deserts, and because of its history and the insurgents' attachment to the local population. It is not for nothing that the country earned the threatening nickname of Graveyard of Empires, due to the large number of powers that tried to plant their flag there, but failed miserably in the process. To reverse that history, the Royal Marines were tasked with conquering small communities, then protecting them from attacks by Taliban terrorists. Keep in mind that many Afghan civilians were victims of the violence of this extremist group, so much so that they had to flee their homes in search of a more peaceful place to settle. Let's listen to the exchange between a British soldier and a butcher from Helmand province.
He says
I spent a lot of money to build this job, but if you can see now, everything has been damaged.
Yes,
because of the enemy, because of fighting of both sides. You know.
Are you planning to move straight back in as soon as it's cleared?
Of course, I will come and I will carry on with my...
As the butcher described, thousands of traders had to flee armed fighting between Islamic insurgents and coalition troops made up of the United States and its allies. This dynamic generated strong resentment among the inhabitants of Afghanistan, who saw the British and Americans as the reason why their lives went through truly miserable years. Such exchanges were very frequent during British operations on Afghan soil. Language was a huge barrier that had to be overcome by means of translators or by using the rudimentary words in Dari Persian that the soldiers learned during their training. This was a very big problem since there were numerous misunderstandings between the civilian population and the uniformed corps that were there trying to catch the Taliban. During interrogations and searches, a simple question could lead to an argument due to the language gap, a factor that was not taken into account initially, but which proved to be crucial if one wanted to gain the trust and collaboration of a people. But beyond hearing the local stories, the Royal Marines had some clear missions. One of them was to help control Helmand, one of Afghanistan's most important provinces, to ensure that the Taliban could not regroup around rural communities. Here is one of the many talks before setting out on patrol.
Okay, the intent over the next few days, and in particular taking a start with today, is to start to take the fight to the insurgent. Last time patrol was in and around this area, extremely bad atmospherics. We generated accurate reporting that they were watching us. If we do not clear this area and push them out of our AO, all right, the insurgent is going to remain in our area, all right, and we're going to continue to come across Yeah, the old threat of the IED.
Sergeant Taff Hunter was clear in his description of the objectives. The entire terrorist base needed to be cleared from the area of operations if they were to avoid further IED accidents. During the invasion of Afghanistan, the Taliban became experts at using not only conventional mines, but also other types of mines that were converted into ground traps intended to blow vehicles to pieces. The terrorists even used old Soviet-era artillery shells, which were manipulated to explode on contact or by an electrical signal sent by remote control when the target was above the device. Taff Hunter was really worried about the IEDs because these silent hunters were wreaking havoc within the coalition force. To give you an idea of the damage caused by homemade bombs, it is estimated that for much of the invasion on Afghan soil, 70% of American and British casualties were caused by such explosives. It is a classic method of guerrilla warfare that was ideal for the type of asymmetric conflict that the Taliban carried out. The only way to prevent them from continuing to mine the entire territory was to capture the terrorists or completely expel them from the communities of Helmand. The price to pay for this security was savage fighting such as the one we will see now, in which members of the Royal Marines had to endure a hail of bullets without retreating an inch. The sound of the machine guns was spectacular. While the Taliban had great tactical ability and absolute knowledge of the territory in their favor, on the western side the weapons were a decisive factor. As part of their training, each member of the Royal Marines must learn to handle a varied arsenal that includes pistols, rifles, machine guns, and sniper rifles, which is very useful when you find yourself in the middle of the desert, surrounded by enemies, and you must defend yourself with the first weapon that falls into your hands without the possibility of choosing the platform. As we mentioned, living with local civilians was one of the great challenges for the international coalition. The language and customs were very different, and each exchange could end in tensions or fights that increased mutual distrust. To make matters worse, British soldiers had to constantly search men and women passing through Helmand communities suspected of hosting terrorists. Usually, situations like the one we will see next occurred.
She wasn't very happy. No.
The Afghan woman claimed not to be carrying any dangerous items. She was also traveling with her young children, so it was unlikely that she would have hidden an assault rifle or a bomb under her clothes. However, it was the duty of the troops to ensure that the people they searched were not allied with the Taliban. A single infiltrator could bring in explosive material or firearms, which always ended in the shedding of innocent blood. Between May and August 2011, the Lima Company of the Royal Marines was tasked with patrolling regions such as Loy Manda in the most inhospitable parts of Helmand, land dominated for years by the Taliban. During the expeditions, it was common to hear chatter between insurgents who were within a few kilometers of each other. Usually these were minor exchanges, but from time to time, the Taliban would hint that they had identified the British presence and were targeting the commando group.
We've generated a first bit of ICOM. They've seen the patrol.
The Marines came with the intention of provoking the Taliban, and already that's exactly what's happened. The hunt is on for both sides.
Stay to the left of that line.
Okay.
The scenario is truly grim. Imagine walking through an area infested with landmines and terrorists looking to cut off your head. Suddenly, over the radio, you hear that this ferocious enemy has already detected you and that you are heading towards a strategic point where he left something hidden. Paranoia was very common among the soldiers, who lived in a constant state of tension, with their guard up day and night. Again, the language barrier played a very important role in this, as they could not hold everyday conversations or fully trust the local inhabitants. That meant that anyone was a potential threat. That communication intercepted by the Lima Company was a very bad sign. The Royal Marines believed that the area was practically free of terrorist presence, but those voices made it clear that there were still operational cells monitoring the activities of the international coalition. The British returned to the main village of Loy Mande, lined up several suspicious men and interrogated them under threat of arrest and sending them to a detention center.
If they don't tell me where they are, I'm going to detain all of them and take them back to the CP and question them. They can see us, so I want to know where they are, or I'm detaining all of you and taking you back to the CP. Okay, tell him he's waffling. All right, I want to know where the Taliban are now, or I'm going to detain all of you and take you in for questioning.
Sergeant Taff Hunter was the one who carried out the street interrogation, taking a confrontational approach and making it clear from the start what the consequences of not collaborating could be. The Afghan men gave vague answers, arguing that the Taliban had long since disappeared from the area. The British soldier did not buy that version for a second and insisted on continuing to question the inhabitants in the hope of finding a clue that would reveal the enemy's positions. At this point, the terrorists could be just a handful or hundreds of fierce soldiers waiting for the right moment to attack. That is why it was essential to find them first. After interviewing the group of civilians, the Royal Marines focused on a young man who was suspected of collaborating with terrorists. With no answers, the only option left to the British was to set up a series of offensive missions to seize the initiative. Finding the Taliban was a top priority, no matter what the price, even if it meant a direct confrontation with a sizable terrorist force. In the vast uninhabited territory surrounding Loy Mande, there were a number of old fortifications that were often used by the Taliban as a resting place and also as firing points. These objectives were named Green 1 and Green 2, and they were the best lead the British had to capture the enemy. The coalition troops reached the first of the fortifications at dawn, and the place was uninhabited but showed signs of recent human habitation. It was time to advance towards Green 2, but to do so they had to cross a very exposed area where the team offered themselves as a very tempting target for the Taliban assault rifles. And so they did. Under the morning sun, gunshots began to ring out, sparking a fierce battle between terrorists and Marines.
Right, get down into cover. Get down into cover.
The power was incredible. While the enemy was impossible to see, it was clear that there were dozens, perhaps hundreds, of Taliban on the horizon, well-armed and bloodthirsty. For weeks they had been scrutinizing the British, and now it was time to show them the fury that Islamic extremism was capable of unleashing on them.
Lads, can you move round into this low ground? Because they're coming round. Move round, quickly get down low. Just get down to that low.
We're under heavy attack. Taliban are fighting back hard. We're pinned down now.
Dawn turned to midday, and the firefight continued into the most inhospitable territories of Helmand. The Royal Marines Patrol Group was able to survive the initial onslaught, requesting immediate support to counter the brutality of the Taliban, who were gathering on the horizon. Thus, the 11th Army arrived in the area, which had light and heavy machine guns that reshaped the balance in terms of firepower.
11 Troop has consolidated on the high ground above Green 1. We have good arcs onto the enemy positions, over.
Heavy machine guns are not only great for that brutal sound and the amount of shells they can spit out in a short time, they also allow for covering fire, meaning they can saturate the enemy with hundreds of rounds, preventing them from getting up and responding. In this way, the 11th Army's machine guns allowed their comrades to advance in relative safety toward Green 2, the second of those old fortifications that the Taliban front used to use. However, even with the most potent covering fire on the planet, the danger of coming face to face with an enemy always exists. That's why the soldiers took safety measures in case a close quarters fight broke out.
Right, lads, staying in the low ground. Staying in the low ground, we're going to push on to green 2.
Last minute, 2 seconds.
The enemy could be hiding anywhere in the ruined compounds, so the order is given to fix bayonets.
Jackson.
With bayonets at the ready, the Marines advanced cautiously, the sound of machine guns and rifle fire providing the soundtrack to a chilling march. The distance between Green 1 and Green 2 was only a few hundred meters, but on that distance it was very easy to be intercepted by a Taliban shell.
Right, get down here.
We are pinned down as the incoming bullets kick up the rock and the sand all around us.
Covering fire worked hard to take up most of the terrorists' attention as the rest of the team advanced on Green 2. When they finally reached that crumbling fortification, no one was there. The Taliban fled quickly, blending into the landscape, vanishing in the warm wind blowing in from the Afghan valleys. Still, the British found traces of their presence there. Shells, burnt rocks, and a few bloodstains, indicating that they did not emerge unscathed from their attack. Eager to close the day with a powerful blow to this elusive and deadly enemy, the Marines called in air reinforcements. A heavily armed Apache helicopter zoomed in from the skies to destroy the terrorists' fortifications and potential hideouts. Let's see the overwhelming power of this beast.
Yeah, just the warning.
Heading west, roughly 8 packs, all tools up, over. Go for it, mate.
Right on target. The destruction of the position significantly shortened the Taliban's operational capacity. The soldiers celebrated with screams and cheers after a dangerously close encounter with death. In such cases, there is no better catharsis than seeing a powerful column of smoke rise from your enemy's territory. The Royal Marines were really important during the operations in the Middle East. Although we usually remember the participation of American troops, the truth is that this British commando was one of those that had the greatest number of clashes against the Taliban front. Not only that, but they were the protagonists of highly successful missions against some of the best trained groups of Islamic terrorism. This way we come to the end of the video. If you like this type of content and want to discover more related stories, we invite you to subscribe and activate the notifications of our channel. That way you can stay up to date with all our news. Without further ado, we say goodbye until the next installment of Military Force. Thank you for joining us.